When it comes to miniatures games, I believe with a religious fervor that positioning skills, matters, mechanics are of paramount importance. More so than any other game mechanic, this emphasis on positioning, I believe, separates tabletop miniatures games from other tabletop games like board games, card games, tabletop RPGs. And in this video, we're going to talk about some of the ones that I like the most and some of the ones that I don't like that much. Roll that intro. Welcome to Corner Case. You're in the hobby corner. I'm your host, your optimal range band, and your best friend, Deck. For those of you new to the channel, we like to cover mechanics on this channel. I love how the board game community is so organized in the way they discuss board game mechanics. I would like to bring that to miniature gaming culture. I have a playlist, link in the description or on our channel page, just all of our mechanics videos. Check them out if you like this type of topic. Probably before we even talk about the specific mechanics, I need to first clear up my position on pre-measuring. Generally, I think no pre-measuring is more fun. That's a pretty blanket statement. Games all deal with this in a different way. A lot of games choose when you're able to measure, but generally speaking, I think when you're not just allowed to pre-measure all the time, for me at least, that makes a more fun gameplay experience. Just my opinion, so you know my bias. That's where I'm coming from. I like to play hard mode. I just get so much adrenaline from making the decision blind, like you're not really sure, you're trying to eyeball the distance, and when I nail it, just so much dopamine. So that's where I'm coming from. So, in no particular order, first, the casual observer can tell that Infinity is a shooting game. But what I didn't know until I started playing was how gun range bands in Infinity are managed in such a way as to reward good positioning and punish bad positioning. So, in addition to specifying the maximum range a gun can fire, all guns in Infinity have an optimal range and a suboptimal range. As an example, a combi rifle is a common gun in Infinity. You can see here that it gives you a +3 modifier up to 16 inches. It gives you a -3 modifier up to 32 inches. And beyond that, until 48 inches, it gives you a -6. Let's compare that combi rifle that incentivizes close range positioning with the multi-sniper rifle. The multi-sniper rifle profile you will see has a -3 modifier up to 8 inches, a 0 modifier up to 16 inches, and a +3 modifier all the way up to 48 inches, and only a -3 after that. So you can see how more common weapons have a higher penalty for bad positioning, but I like that. I think it makes the game way more fun. Deciding where to position your models is an opportunity for a good player decision moment. Sometimes you have to make trade-offs. Those trade-offs are you might have to take a bad shot sometimes. There are a lot of modifiers that go into shooting in Infinity, but positioning is one that the player can very directly control. So I think that is what makes this mechanic really cool. It's a good simulation of different guns like in real life, but it's also a very rewarding system for people who invest in their positioning skills. There's a similar mechanic in X-Wing. Attackers get +1 die at range 1. And defenders get +1 die at range 3. And speaking of X-Wing, oh my goodness, I have said it on this channel before, but I love X-Wing 1.0, and early X-Wing 1.0 rule system is probably still to this day what I consider like the paragon of positioning skills matters mechanics. And this positioning skills matters game is what got me into the hobby of tabletop gaming. Let's talk about it. For those of you who have never played X-Wing before, the way movement is handled is both players secretly select maneuvers for all their ships at the top of the round. Then there is another phase where movement is revealed and resolved in initiative order. From like a meta perspective, the intrigue of the subgame of trying to figure out what maneuvers you need to do, what maneuvers your opponent is trying to do, and trying to outmaneuver each other was like such a fun head game. But there's also the simulation component of this rule that I think is fun too, where it does a good job, even if in slow motion, it does a good job of simulating the chaos of that dogfight, that slow motion dogfight. It feels like as a pilot, your perception is just a half a second behind all of the maneuvers that are happening at the same time, which I think is really weird because this is like a slow motion dogfight. I think realistically a game of X-Wing, if you were to play it on screen, probably take like less than a minute. If we made it into a movie or something, it's like a round of D&D, but it does such a great job of simulating trying to outmaneuver your opponent from a head game, and in a weird way, the perception of the chaos of all the ships flying at the same time. Positioning skills just so important in this game. I remember early on X-Wing 1.0, the Hal Runner swarm, that is a throwback for some of y'all. For those of y'all unfamiliar, Hal Runner is a TIE fighter that gives a reroll on one attack die for ships within range 1 of Hal Runner. So what you would fly back then was like 6 TIE fighters plus Hal Runner, and you would fly them in formation. So you have this brick of TIE fighters that you're trying to maneuver so that they don't bump into each other, and so that they can get that maximum benefit from Hal Runner. And again, in X-Wing, if you bump, you can't shoot. So that was like a really punishing mechanic where if you messed up, if you weren't good at executing that swarm, piloting that swarm in X-Wing with Hal Runner, you could just deny yourself shots if you made the wrong choice. There are, of course, other mechanics, death ball mechanics in other games. So, for example, Malifaux has like a couple masters that like to play a death ball kind of style. Warhammer 40K, of course, has a couple armies that like to play a death ball kind of style. Death ball, you keep all your units clumped up together, and then you just go down the board, you just mow. But the reason X-Wing just hit different is because, and that Hal Runner swarm is because of the penalty. So it gives you such a big upside for being able to maneuver it, but it also punishes you if you're unable to maneuver it properly. So I really like that pressure on the execution. So you're able to get a good benefit. You have to execute properly. Kind of the same thing as with that infinity mechanic I was talking about. If you execute properly, you get a +3 modifier. But if you're out of position or someone else is shooting at you from their optimal position, not yours, you get punished. So I think that really enforces how much the positioning skill matters, is that punishing mechanic. Man, I don't know what I sound like. I just said the word punish like 8 times, and we're not even talking about fighting games, so feels weird, but it's that. Yeah. Now, not to get salty, but one positioning mechanic that just baffles me, that I don't really get and I don't really like, is the Warhammer 40K charging mechanic. So the fundamental reason I don't like the charging mechanic is it feels a little bit less like a positioning matters mechanic. Let's walk it back for those of you who are here that for some reason have never played Warhammer 40K. When you want to get into melee combat in Warhammer 40K, you have to do a charge action. That means you have to be within 12 inches to be within 1 inch of your target, and then you have to roll 2d6 to see if your unit can make it into that 12-inch range to get into combat. And if you fail, then you don't get to fight. So the reason I don't like this mechanic is fundamentally it's not a reward for good positioning or punish for bad positioning. It's more just like a nerf for melee. And in addition, it's also, I think, a very poor simulation. So it doesn't matter in Warhammer if you are a Tyranid or a Necron or a Guardsman. You have a maximum of 12 inches. That's how long you can charge. And it doesn't matter if you are a bike, a jet bike, or you are a Guardsman on foot. You have a 12-inch charge. So already like the simulation doesn't really make sense. And what's more is this 12-inch charge mechanic bleeds into other mechanics. So when you deep strike in Warhammer 40K, they give you a constraint of outside of 9 inches of the closest enemy model. where you want to deep strike. So that 9 inches is kind of arbitrary. I mean, realistically, in the world of Warhammer, if you have the opportunity to just plop right into a squad of your enemy, if you can just drop pod right in there, if you can just teleport right in there and then just like beat face, that's like obviously what you would do. So I see this like 9-inch deep strike rule as a purely gamey rule. And because they have the charge mechanic, well, then they're like, okay, well, we want to give people incentive to try to deep strike in and charge. But if we make it a 7-inch, 7 inch is like the average, you know, you're going to get the most results on a 7 with 2d6. So we have to make it a little bit harder. So it's going to be 9. And then people start to deploy their units in such a way as to keep, you know, to lock out that edge of the board for their deployment zone. So people can't come in from 9 inches from any side, because so they've screened them out, which is a positioning skills matters kind of move. But I just feel weird about it because it's built on this like weird house of band-aids. That's like it feels like they wanted to nerf melee, so then they added this charge mechanic. Then because of that charge mechanic, it affects like how far things can deep strike in, because it feels bad if you just deep strike in straight to your opponent. And then how do you even resolve the mix of those units together, you know, in a way that's fair? So it's like such a core part of the core gameplay of 40K, but so much of it is either just like a poor simulation or a band-aid fix reaction to the rules that they already wrote. So that's like one of the most painful like positioning mechanics for me to even just think about. It's not rewarding, and it's like self-referential and reaction. I'm gonna stop now. Back to the good stuff. You know that I cannot talk about game mechanics in a video and not bring up, guess what? Guild Ball. I have always loved the ganging up and crowding out mechanics in Guild Ball. I just think that they are such an elegant simulation of and incentive to dogpile in football. Football should be, especially in the world of Guild Ball, should be a dogpile, and these ganging up and crowding out rules efficiently, essentially, and elegantly do that. Basically, when you go for an attack, you get +1 die for every friendly model engaging your target. You get -1 die for every enemy model engaging you. So it kind of incentivizes everyone to just dogpile in. And I just think that's so elegant and fun. It's a good simulation, and it also has a very straightforward and easy to understand and remember and impactful in-game manifestation. There are other mechanics like this in other games. Again, our girl Malifaux, some units like the Steam Arachnids, when they latch on, when they're in base contact with an enemy unit, they can decrease the defense by 1. Warhammer Underworlds. I am not a 100% Warhammer hater. I do like the Underworlds game. And in Underworlds, when you have units supporting, that means like around your targeted unit when you're doing an attack, like ganging up, it turns on sides of the die, your dice that are not active unless you have supporting units. So I think that's pretty cool, but it's just within the context of Guild Ball, because of the added accuracy or appropriateness of that simulation of the dog pile, that makes it like fun, and I just have the most experience with it. So let's be honest, I'm just biased. I just like it. Rest in peace, Guild Ball. So, what positioning, skills, matters, mechanics do you guys like? Let me know in the comments. I always love to hear about weird or different mechanics that from games that I haven't played before, or just different takes on games that I have played before. Let's talk about it in the comments, in the Discord. Thank you so much for stopping by. We always appreciate you. Thank you so much to our supporters on Patreon. Thank you to everyone on the Discord. Join the Discord. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
I am ready to subscribe again.